The galaxy had always seen humanity as a curiosity, a small, fragile species clinging to a blue-green world at the edge of an unremarkable spiral arm. To the great empires that ruled the stars, Earth was nothing more than a backwater. A young civilization still fumbling with rockets, still struggling with peace, still learning to crawl among the stars. When the first contact came, it wasn't a warship or a beam of light splitting the skies. It was a quiet message, broadcast across the void, written in mathematical precision. The Galactic Concord wanted to assess humanity, to see if this noisy, unpredictable species posed any danger. The answer came after months of observation. The report circulated among the alien councils like gossip. Humanity ranked harmless. It was almost insulting. The Concord had watched us laugh and fight, create and destroy, fall and rise again. Yet all they saw was fragility. They saw the tears, the wars, the endless debates over borders and beliefs, and concluded that we were too divided, too emotional, too chaotic to ever become a threat. They thought kindness meant weakness, compassion meant naivety, and our endless arguments meant we could never stand together. But they made one mistake. They confused peace with helplessness. When the galactic news channels announced the ranking, the universe laughed. On the great worlds of the Shara Dominion, on the massive trade hubs of the Cathal Confederacy, and in the floating cities of the Vorin Collective, humans became a joke. The harmless species, the storytellers, the apes that dream of stars. Some species even sent ambassadors to Earth, not to form alliances, but to offer protection. They spoke slowly, as if talking to children. Yet humanity didn't get angry, not at first. We did what we always do when mocked. We smiled, nodded, and learned. We invited the galaxy in. We traded. We asked questions. We listened. And all the while we took notes. We mapped trade routes, studied alien languages, learned their histories and their wars. Every insult, every condescending gesture was fuel for something deeper, something patient. Years passed. The Concord went on with its politics, its wars of pride and profit. Humanity spread slowly, settling moons, mining asteroids, sending colonies to the nearest systems. The galaxy barely noticed. We were too small to matter. Then came the challenge. It began as entertainment, a tradition among the powerful races. Every few decades, a harmless race was invited to participate in a galactic trial, a test of skill, strength, and endurance. It was meant to remind everyone of their place in the grand order. A spectacle for the rich and a humiliation for the weak. No one had ever won against the Concord's chosen champions. So when humanity was invited, the galaxy expected a good laugh. The announcement spread like wildfire. The harmless ones accept the challenge. On Earth, debates raged. Politicians argued, scientists worried, the public cheered. The galaxy saw only a divided world. But beneath the noise, something began to stir. Old rivalries faded. Engineers from different nations worked side by side. Soldiers trained under the same flag. For the first time in centuries, humanity wasn't thinking about borders or politics. We were thinking about survival. When the day came, the arena shimmered above a dying red star. Thousands of ships surrounded it, filled with spectators eager to see Earth's humiliation. The first challenge was strength. Simple, direct. A test to break bodies and spirits. The opponents were giants from a world of crushing gravity. They laughed as they faced the small humans. But the humans didn't fight to overpower. They fought to outlast. They adapted, adjusted, learned their rhythm, used the environment. By the end of the match, the giants were exhausted and the humans were still standing. The crowd fell silent. The next challenge was strategy. A war simulation that tested intelligence and coordination. The alien fleets moved with mathematical perfection. The human commanders moved with instinct. They made choices no machine would ever make. Irrational, emotional, daring. When the simulation ended, the alien admirals accused the humans of cheating. The Concorde investigated. They found no violations, only innovation. By the third challenge, the laughter was gone. The galaxy that once mocked us began to whisper, "Who are these creatures? How did they learn so fast?" And when humanity won the final test, a trial of endurance that lasted 30 days and nights on a world of storms, the silence of the crowd was more terrifying than any roar. For the first time, the Conquered looked at Earth not as a curiosity, but as a mirror. A reminder of what they had lost, the fire, the chaos, the defiance that once made them great. But pride runs deep in empires. The Conquered could not allow this small species to shatter their image of superiority. In secret, they planned a demonstration to remind the galaxy of order. A fleet was dispatched to a human colony near the outer rim. Officially, it was a training exercise. In reality, it was meant to send a message. The galaxy still ruled. When the first ships appeared in the skies of New Horizon, the colonists sent a distress call. They didn't expect an answer in time. But humanity had changed. The fleet that responded wasn't vast. Just a handful of ships built with borrowed tech and human ingenuity. The Conquered didn't even bother to raise shields when they arrived. Harmless, they thought. Slow. Predictable. What followed wasn't a battle. It was a lesson. The humans fought like no species had ever fought before. They didn't follow patterns, didn't obey tactics known to the galactic academies. They turned every disadvantage into a weapon. When a ship was damaged, it became bait. When they ran out of munitions, they rammed. When their systems failed, they improvised. The battle was chaos. Pure, terrifying chaos. The Concorde fleet, built for precision and control, couldn't adapt. Within hours, the sky above New Horizon was filled with burning wreckage. The message spread faster than light. The Harmless ones had destroyed a Concorde armada. Panic rippled through the galaxy. Treaties were rewritten overnight. Trade routes were closed. Some worlds tried to isolate Earth. Others reached out in fear or curiosity. But no one dared to laugh anymore. The official report from the Concorde tried to downplay the event, called it an anomaly. But deep down, every leader, every commander, every scholar across the stars knew the truth. Humanity wasn't harmless. We were patient. We were adaptable. And when pushed, we were relentless. Still, even after the smoke cleared, one question remained. A question whispered in the halls of alien empires and in the war rooms of Earth. If humanity could do this with so little, what would happen when we truly reached the stars? Because somewhere beyond the rim, the galaxy was watching. Some watched with fear, others with admiration, and a few with plans of their own. And deep in the void, where old wars had been forgotten and ancient weapons still slept, something began to stir. Something that remembered the last time a harmless species had risen. Humanity was no longer the punchline of a galactic joke. We had just become the next great question. And the galaxy was about to learn how dangerous a harmless species could be. The aftermath of the Battle of New Horizon changed everything. For the first time, humanity stood in the center of galactic attention. Not as an experiment or an underdog, but as a wild card. No one could predict what Earth would do next. The old assumptions were gone. Every admiral, every counselor, every spy wanted to know how a harmless species had defeated ships that were supposed to be invincible. The truth was both simple and terrifying. Humanity had learned how the galaxy thought, but the galaxy had never learned how humans thought. The Concorde began an investigation. They demanded reports, scans, and testimony. Their fleet stayed close to human borders, watching, measuring, waiting for a sign of aggression. But humanity didn't strike again. Instead, Earth went silent. Colonies stopped responding to Conquered requests. Trade channels went dark. Even human diplomats, the ones who had once begged for a seat at the table, disappeared from the galactic scene. It was as if an entire species had stepped back into the shadows. On Earth, things were changing fast. The victory had united the world in ways no war ever had. Old nations didn't vanish, but they learned to share. Scientists from every continent worked together under a new banner, the Stellar Accord. It wasn't a government, not really. It was more like a promise, a vow that humanity would never again let others decide its fate. The Accord built quietly. They didn't construct fleets for conquest. Instead, they focused on understanding. They studied alien technology, dissected what had worked during the battle, and improved it. They sent small exploration teams into uncharted space, not to claim territory, but to learn. Every mission was a risk, but every discovery made humanity stronger. The galaxy, meanwhile, grew restless. Rumors began to spread. Stories of human ships seen near restricted sectors, of colonies appearing on worlds once thought uninhabitable. Some claimed humanity had found something ancient out there, something powerful. Others whispered that Earth was building an army. The truth was stranger still. Among the teams sent beyond known space was one led by a quiet commander, a man who had once been a pilot during the New Horizon conflict. His crew was small, just a handful of explorers, engineers, and scientists. They were sent to investigate a region the Conquered called the Silent Belt, a stretch of space filled with derelict structures and dead stars. No one went there anymore. Ships that entered rarely returned. They found it by accident, a station drifting in the dark, half buried in the shadow of a broken moon. Its design didn't match any known species. The hull was ancient, the markings eroded by time. Inside, they discovered traces of a language older than the Concorde itself. It wasn't alien in the way most things were. It felt familiar. Too familiar. The station wasn't a ruin, it was a warning. Its walls told stories in carvings and symbols of a war that had burned across the galaxy long before the Concorde existed, of a species that rose from obscurity, defied the empires of their age, and vanished into myth. The carvings ended with a single phrase, repeated again and again in different dialects. They thought we were harmless. When the commander brought the data back to Earth, the Stellar Accord kept it secret. Only a handful of people ever saw the recordings. What they learned changed their understanding of humanity's place in the cosmos. Maybe the ranking of harmless wasn't just arrogance. Maybe it was fear, disguised as dismissal. Maybe the galaxy had seen this pattern before. But the more they studied, the more questions appeared. Who built that station? Why did their language resemble fragments of old Earth tongues? And what had happened to them? While the scientists argued, the Concorde began to act. The destruction of their fleet had humiliated them. They needed control, and control meant power. Fleets were repositioned, alliances shifted, old rivalries reignited. Some factions wanted to destroy Earth before it could rise any higher. Others wanted to recruit it, to use humanity's unpredictable nature as a weapon. The galaxy's balance was breaking, and humanity stood at the center of it. Meanwhile, on Earth, people began to feel the weight of what was coming. News feeds buzzed with rumors of fleets moving toward the outer colonies. The Accord denied it, but citizens knew better. Industries that had once built ships for exploration now worked around the clock producing defensive systems. The governments called it precaution. But everyone could feel it. War was coming. Among the colonies, stories began to circulate, tales of strangers appearing on remote worlds, offering knowledge in exchange for silence. They didn't belong to any known species. Their technology was ancient, smooth, elegant in ways no modern design could match. They asked questions about humans, about the Stellar Accord, about the Battle of New Horizon. And then, just as suddenly, they vanished. When fragments of one of their ships were recovered, analysts realized something chilling. The materials used in its construction matched the same alloys found on the derelict station in the Silent Belt. Someone, or something, from that forgotten era was watching again. Inside the conquered, fear turned to desperation. They couldn't allow the past to repeat itself. They began preparing containment operations, though the official records never used the word war. The media called it stabilization. Fleets gathered quietly near human space. The galaxy's most powerful empires, united not by trust, but by fear, began to surround a single planet, Earth, and humanity knew it. But this time, we were ready. The Stellar Accord had learned from centuries of division. They didn't want conquest or glory. They wanted survival and freedom. They had seen what happened when larger powers ruled the stars. And they knew the Concord's fear wasn't really about humanity's strength. It was about something deeper, the one thing no empire could predict or control: choice. Humans chose to fight, to fail, to try again. We didn't follow patterns, we didn't wait for permission, and that made us dangerous in a universe built on order. As fleets assembled on the edge of the solar system, small ships slipped silently into the void. They weren't soldiers. They were scouts, diplomats, engineers. Their mission wasn't to destroy, but to understand what was truly coming. One of those ships carried the same commander who had found the derelict station. His new assignment was different. He was to follow a trail of transmissions picked up beyond the Concord's outer sectors. The signals matched the ancient language found on the station. They pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat in the dark. The journey took months. The deeper they went, the stranger the signals became. Sometimes they sounded like voices, other times like echoes of human speech. The crew grew uneasy. They began to dream of cities buried in dust, of oceans burning, of shadows stretching across the stars. And then, one day, the signal stopped. In its place came something new. A transmission directed straight at their ship. It was short, no longer than a few seconds. The translation system struggled to decode it, but when the message finally appeared on the screen, no one spoke. It said, "You were not the first. Do not repeat our mistake." Before they could trace the source, something massive shifted in the darkness ahead. Sensors flickered, energy readings spiked, the ship's lights dimmed, and in the void beyond the viewport, something vast moved, silent and ancient, like a shadow older than time. The commander gave the order to retreat, but the engines failed. Alarms echoed through the corridors, and as the crew scrambled, the last thing they saw was a pattern of lights forming across the creature's surface. The same markings found on the station. The signal cut out. Back on Earth, when the transmission reached the Stellar Accord, the room fell into silence. No one knew what the message truly meant, only that something beyond their understanding had awakened. And while the galaxy prepared for another war, humanity faced a greater question. Were we the heirs of a forgotten power, or the next chapter in an ancient warning? The stars were no longer quiet. The Watchers had returned, and the galaxy was about to remember why it once feared the Harmless. The silence after the transmission was worse than any battle. The Stellar Accord command chamber remained still for several minutes, as if everyone was waiting for someone else to speak first. The words on the screen, "You were not the first. Do not repeat our mistake," played over and over in everyone's mind. It wasn't just a warning. It felt personal. It felt directed. The commander's ship was gone. No debris, no distress beacon, no trace. Just the echo of that message drifting through the void. For days, analysts tried to decode deeper meaning in the signal. Some said it was an automated transmission triggered by the ship's approach. Others believed it was sent by something still alive out there. The scientists debated endlessly, but the truth stayed out of reach. What they all agreed on was that the words weren't random. Whoever, or whatever, sent them knew humanity was listening. The Stellar Accord Council met in secret sessions after that. Reports from the colonies showed growing unrest. Rumors spread faster than official statements could contain. People whispered about the lost expedition, about the shadows moving beyond mapped space, about fleets forming in the dark. Panic didn't show up in the news feeds, but it lived in the air, thick and heavy. On the outskirts of Mars, in the shipyards orbiting Deimos, workers labored in silence. They weren't building exploration vessels anymore. The new ships were different, faster, darker, built with alloys reverse-engineered from alien wrecks. The engineers didn't talk much about where the designs came from. They just followed the specifications given to them by the Accord's defense branch. In a dim hangar, a young systems technician paused during a shift to look out at the red planet below. She had heard the rumors, too. The missing ship, the warning, the old symbols carved into the ruins. She wasn't a soldier. She just wanted to build something that would keep her family safe. But lately, even that felt uncertain. Every new model they finished looked less like a ship and more like something meant for war. Far from Mars, on the Concord side of the border, a different kind of meeting was taking place. The Galactic Concord wasn't united anymore. The empires that made up its council had started to fracture under the pressure of fear. Some leaders demanded a preemptive strike on Earth before the humans spread their chaos further. Others argued that attacking would make things worse. A few even suspected that the Concord's own technology might not be enough to stop what was coming. The Concord's intelligence division, known quietly as the Observers, had been monitoring human communications for months. They knew the Stellar Accord had gone silent. They knew the expedition had vanished. But they didn't know about the message. That single missing piece drove them mad. To them, humanity's silence looked like planning. An agent named Kale, from one of the smaller Concord species, had been stationed near the human border for years. He'd studied them longer than most of his peers, and he didn't believe the propaganda. To him, humanity wasn't dangerous because of weapons or ships. It was dangerous because of belief. Humans believed in impossible things and made them real. They believed in second chances. They believed in stories. And that belief made them unpredictable. Kyle sent a report warning the Concord Council not to provoke Earth further. It went unanswered. Meanwhile, within the Stellar Accord, divisions had begun to form, too. Some council members wanted to reveal everything: the derelict station, the message, even the lost expedition, to the public. They argued that the people had a right to know what was coming. Others insisted secrecy was the only way to maintain order. The more they argued, the more time slipped away. Then, one night, a new transmission appeared. It wasn't from deep space. It came from one of the outer colonies, a mining world called Vale's End. The colony reported strange activity in orbit: flickers of light, energy spikes, and unregistered ships moving without transponders. Before command could respond, the feed went dead. For the next 2 days, the colony was silent. When a scout ship finally arrived, all it found were empty buildings and burnt-out machines. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just silence. The Stellar Accord tried to keep it quiet, but the news leaked anyway. Within hours, social channels were flooded with theories. Some said it was the Concord. Others blamed the ancients from the derelict station. A few even believed it was humanity itself, cleaning up evidence of something they shouldn't have found. On Earth, people began to panic. Families called for evacuation ships. Old underground shelters were reopened. The media tried to calm the storm, but the fear kept spreading. It wasn't the kind of fear that came from an enemy. It was the kind that came from not knowing. Back in orbit, the Accord's military branch began mobilizing in earnest. Patrols doubled, sensor nets expanded. Every ship that left human space was tracked. The Council's official stance was still defensive readiness, but everyone knew what it really meant. They were preparing for war. And yet, deep within the Stellar Accord's hidden research stations, another project was underway, one no one outside a select few even knew existed. It was called Project Mirror. Its goal wasn't to build weapons. It was to understand the ancient message and the technology behind it. The scientists believed that whatever wiped out the builders of the derelict station could happen again. unless humanity learned what it was. Among the researchers was an older linguist who had spent years studying alien texts. She was the first to notice that the carvings from the derelict station weren't just warnings, they were records. They described how the ancient civilization had grown too quickly, challenged too many powers, and awakened something hidden in the depths of the galaxy. The linguist worked night after night trying to translate the final sections of the carvings. What she found made her stop breathing for a moment. The symbols weren't just history, they were instructions. She brought her findings to her superior immediately. When he read them, his expression turned cold. He told her to erase the data, to destroy every trace of it. Some truths, he said, should never be rediscovered. But she didn't listen. She made a copy. That same night, she sent the file to a contact outside the Accord's secure network. Someone she trusted. Someone who believed that knowledge shouldn't be buried. Then she disappeared. Days later, fragments of the file surfaced across human networks. Scrambled pieces of text, incomplete diagrams, half-decoded transmissions. The message was clear enough to anyone who read between the lines. The ancients weren't destroyed by enemies. They were consumed by something they created. The story spread like wildfire. For some, it confirmed their fears, that humanity was following the same path. For others, it sparked determination. If the ancients had fallen because of their creation, maybe humanity could learn from it and finish what they started. While debates raged, the Concorde finally made its move. A fleet appeared near the edge of human space, not large enough to invade, but big enough to make a point. They sent a message to the Stellar Accord. Stand down your weapons and surrender your outer colonies for protection. Refuse and face consequences. The demand was met with silence. Then, one by one, human colonies began losing contact, some to power failures, some to jamming, others simply vanished. The Concorde claimed no involvement, but their fleets lingered near every affected system. In the shadows, the Stellar Accord debated their next step. Some wanted to retaliate, others urged restraint. But as the reports of missing colonies grew, patience thinned. And through it all, the old message haunted them. You are not the first. Do not repeat our mistake. Because now no one was sure what the real enemy was. The Concorde was hostile, yes, but so was the unknown. Something older was stirring, moving beneath the surface of space, unseen but ever closer. And somewhere out there, beyond the reach of any sensor, a signal pulsed again. Weak, steady, familiar. The lost commander's voice broke through the static. They found us. We're not alone. It's awake. Then the signal died. Humanity stood on the edge of revelation and ruin, the galaxy closing in from one side and something ancient rising from the other. And for the first time in history, even the stars seemed to hold their breath. The signal from the lost commander spread across the Stellar Accord's networks like wildfire. It was short, corrupted, but unmistakably human. They found us. We're not alone. It's awake. Then silence. No one knew how the message had reached them. The ship had been declared lost months ago, but the data was authentic, the coordinates real. Somewhere beyond the silent belt, something was moving. The council was thrown into chaos. Military leaders demanded immediate action, while scientists pleaded for caution. The words, "It's awake," lingered like an echo in everyone's mind. Awake meant alive. And alive meant it could still be out there, whatever it was. For the first time since humanity entered the galactic stage, the Stellar Accord faced more than fear of invasion. They faced uncertainty that felt alive, the kind that didn't come from an enemy fleet or a political threat, but from something older, something watching. On Earth, people gathered around screens as fragments of the signal leaked to the public. Everyone wanted answers. But the truth was that no one had any. Governments issued calm statements, promising protection, unity, and vigilance. Behind closed doors, though, the mood was anything but calm. The council's private sessions lasted days, and no one came out looking hopeful. Among them was Admiral Kieran, one of the few who had been at New Horizon. He was a man who didn't scare easily, but this was different. The idea that something could erase ships without a trace, silence colonies, and reach across impossible distances. It was beyond any known weapon or species. He didn't know what frightened him more, that it existed, or that it might not be alien at all. Whispers began to circulate through the ranks of the fleet. Pilots joked nervously that the galaxy's ghosts had come back. Engineers refused to work alone. Even the newest recruits could feel it, the quiet pressure of dread building at the edge of known space. Then came the report from the fringe observatories. Unexplained gravitational shifts, stars flickering unnaturally, massive energy distortions that appeared for seconds and vanished. Some said it was the Concorde's secret weapon. Others thought it was the same thing that took the colonies. Whatever it was coming closer. Admiral Kieran ordered the assembly of a reconnaissance fleet, small, fast ships equipped with the best sensors humanity had. They would go to the edge of the silent belt, to the coordinates from the commander's final transmission. Their mission wasn't to engage, but to observe and return. Among the crew chosen for the mission was the young technician from the Mars shipyards. She had been reassigned after a systems breakthrough that made her designs invaluable. When she received the orders, she didn't hesitate. Her work had helped build the ships that might now save humanity or lead it to its doom. The fleet launched in silence, their drives cutting through the void toward a region no one wanted to see again. The closer they got, the stranger things became. Instruments glitched. Time delays stretched and shrank without reason. Light bent in ways no one could explain. And through it all, a low hum vibrated in the hull, too deep to be mechanical, too steady to be coincidence. When they reached the coordinates, they found wreckage, but not human wreckage. The ships floating there were massive, old beyond belief, their hulls scarred with symbols matching those from the derelict station. They weren't destroyed by battle. They were hollowed out, as if something had drained them from within. And in the middle of it all, a single structure stood, an enormous spire twisting upward like frozen smoke. It pulsed faintly with light, as if breathing. The fleet stopped a safe distance away. Every scanner, every probe, every analysis said the same thing. The spire wasn't just a structure. It was alive. Admiral Kieran ordered a full transmission back to Earth. Before they could finish the data upload, the light from the spire changed. The pulse grew faster, and then, for the first time, it spoke. Not in sound, not even in language. It spoke in thought. Each crew member felt it differently, some as voices, others as memories, some as raw emotion. The message wasn't clear, but the intent was. It was searching, reaching, recognizing, and then it said one word that froze everyone where they stood. Again. Power systems flickered. The ship's cores overloaded, gravity twisted. Kieran shouted for an emergency jump, but the fleet's drives refused to start. The stars stretched into threads of light, and in an instant, the void turned white. When the light faded, half the ships were gone. The survivors drifted helplessly, systems fried, communications dead. The spire was no longer visible. In its place, a vast shadow moved across the stars, a shape too massive to comprehend. And for a brief moment, one of the ship's cameras caught a glimpse of it. Not a creature, not a machine, but something in between. It moved with purpose, and its surface glowed faintly with symbols that matched human writing. Back on Earth, the partial transmission came through, scrambled and incomplete. The scientists cleaned the feed as best they could. When the image stabilized, the control room fell silent. The massive shape filled the screen for a single second before the feed cut out. And on its hull, written in unmistakable letters, were words that should not have been there at all. Human prototype. That single phrase shattered every theory. Meetings erupted across the stellar accord. Theories flooded in. Some believed it meant the ancients had created humanity, or that humanity was somehow connected to them. Others thought it was proof of manipulation, that the species ranked harmless was part of something much larger and older. The scientists couldn't agree on what the word prototype meant, but the soldiers understood one thing immediately. Whatever it was no accident. Meanwhile, the conquered fleets had reached the borders of human space. They claimed it was for containment, but their weapons were armed. Every attempt at negotiation failed. The galaxy was seconds from war, and in the middle of that chaos, Project Mira reached a breakthrough. The linguists' stolen files had finally been decoded. The ancient records spoke of an experiment, an attempt to create a species capable of surviving the collapse of civilizations. A species born from countless genetic patterns, built to endure, adapt, and rise again. The experiments failed, or so the ancients believed. Their creations turned against them. But one version, one prototype, was sent away, hidden on a distant world until it could grow on its own. Earth. The realization hit the researchers like a wave. Humanity wasn't the first intelligent life of its kind. They were the legacy of something forgotten, a design meant to restart what was lost. But if that was true, then whatever was awakening in the Silent Belt wasn't an enemy. It was the next phase of the same design. Before the Accord could decide what to do, a new signal cut through every channel across the galaxy. It wasn't human or alien, it was universal. The same phrase repeated in every known language, resonating through every star system. The sequence continues. Panic erupted. The conquered went on high alert. Fleets mobilized. Power grids flickered across half the galaxy as the pulse echoed through subspace. For the first time in history, every species looked toward the same point in the sky, the direction of the Silent Belt. Admiral Kieran's fleet hadn't returned. Their ships were still missing, but fragments of their black box data were recovered by a long-range probe. The last seconds of footage showed the shadow expanding, consuming starlight, stretching toward human space. And in those final moments, the commander's voice came through one last time, faint but clear. They were never gone. They left us to finish what they started, and now they're coming home. Every alarm across the Stellar Accord triggered at once. Defense grids activated. Colonies prepared for evacuation. The galaxy's most powerful empires armed themselves, not knowing who or what they were about to face. And deep beneath Earth's surface, inside the Accord's hidden labs, the scientists uncovered something they had missed before. A dormant signal buried in the DNA of every human being. A faint frequency, silent until now, pulsing in time with the galactic broadcast. One by one, across the world, sensors began detecting the same rhythm inside human bodies. It wasn't harmful, but it was synchronized. Something was calling us. And as the stars dimmed and the transmissions grew louder, one truth became impossible to ignore. Humanity wasn't just a part of the story. We were the story continuing itself. But whether we were its saviors or its final mistake, no one could yet tell. The pulse in humanity's DNA wouldn't stop. It had begun softly, barely detectable by medical sensors, but now it was measurable across entire populations. It wasn't random. It had rhythm, timing, purpose. Hospitals and laboratories all over Earth reported the same readings. Heart rates sinking, brainwaves aligning, subtle shifts in electromagnetic activity. It was as if every human being on the planet was starting to resonate with something beyond themselves. At first, the Stellar Accord tried to keep it secret. They called it a solar interference event, but word spread fast. People noticed their devices flickering, watches and clocks losing track of time, lights dimming in unison. Something was humming beneath the surface of reality, and it was humming in tune with them. Then came the dreams. Reports flooded in from all corners of the colonies, people describing the same visions, cities of glass and shadow, oceans of fire, stars collapsing into eyes that watched from the dark. Some saw a towering figure of light reaching out toward them. Others heard voices whispering in forgotten languages. No one could explain it, but the details were too consistent to ignore. The Accord scientists began to realize what they were dealing with wasn't just biological. It was psychological synchronization. The entire species was connecting on a level beyond communication. The signal from the silent belt was not only awakening something out there, it was awakening something within. Admiral Kieran, now overseeing defense coordination from orbit, hadn't slept in 3 days. Every message from the front lines brought new uncertainty. The Concorde was massing fleets near human space, ready to strike, and yet their scouts reported something strange. Concorde ships near the silent belt were vanishing too. No wreckage, no distress calls, just gone. Whatever was coming wasn't just targeting humanity, it was spreading. In a private session, Kieran met with the head of Project Mirror, who looked pale and shaken. "It's not just us," she said, pulling up a hologram. "Every species in the Concorde shows traces of the same genetic marker, dormant like ours was. But humanity's version is active. It's leading." Kieran frowned. "Leading what?" She hesitated. "A reactivation sequence, something ancient. The signal isn't just calling to us, it's rewriting us." He didn't speak for a long time. He had seen many things in war, losses, betrayals, victories that felt like defeats. But this was something else entirely. If she was right, then humanity wasn't at the center of the galaxy's fear by chance. They were the key to unlocking whatever had been sleeping for eons. Meanwhile, deep beneath Earth's surface, in the Accord's secure biolabs, a group of scientists made a discovery that confirmed those fears. The DNA frequency wasn't just random data, it was a code. When converted into patterns of sound and light, it formed a map. The coordinates pointed not to the silent belt, but to a region beyond it, uncharted, cold, unreachable by conventional drives. They called it the origin point. The decision was immediate. A small team would be sent to follow the map. Their mission was simple: find the origin, learn the truth, and stop whatever was happening before it consumed everything. Among them was the same young technician who had survived the Silent Belt mission. She volunteered without hesitation. She didn't believe humanity was doomed. She believed there was something waiting for them to understand. The ship they used, Harmless, was the most advanced vessel humanity had ever built. Part human design, part alien technology, and part mystery from the data recovered from the ancient ruins. It wasn't meant for combat. It was meant for survival. As they jumped into the unknown, the rest of the galaxy trembled. The Concorde's council fractured completely. Some factions wanted to destroy Earth before the activation spread. Others wanted to ally with humanity, hoping that unity could contain the threat. But the transmissions from the stars were already spreading faster than light. Entire worlds reported synchronized energy pulses. Species across the galaxy began dreaming the same dreams. The phrase, "the sequence continues," echoed across every communication channel, repeated by systems that no one had even activated. Humanity's supposed awakening was no longer confined to humanity. It was becoming galactic. Out in deep space, Artemis V emerged from its jump to find a place no map had ever marked. There were no stars, no planets, just a vast void lit by faint blue light that seemed to come from nowhere. Floating at the center was something that defied understanding, a structure so large it distorted space around it. It wasn't metal or stone. It looked alive yet mechanical, breathing, shifting, pulsing with faint energy patterns that matched the human DNA signal perfectly. The technician stared at the readings. "It's not a planet," she whispered. "It's a seed." The ship's AI confirmed her fear. The structure's core contained molecular patterns nearly identical to human genetic code. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't just ancient. It was related. Humanity wasn't born by accident. They were the continuation of something much older. Before they could transmit their findings, the structure stirred. The light grew brighter and space itself began to warp. Voices filled the ship, not through speakers, but inside their minds. They weren't hostile, but overwhelming. "You have awakened what we left behind." The technician fell to her knees, clutching her head as the voice continued. "We built you to remember, to endure, to begin again when all else failed. But you are not ready." The crew screamed as systems overloaded. The lights flickered, gravity faltered, and for a moment time seemed to stretch infinitely. Then everything went black. Back on Earth, their signal arrived in fragments, static, flickers of light, half-formed words. Scientists pieced together one image before it vanished. A massive, luminous figure emerging from the seed-like structure, humanoid but impossibly vast, reaching out into the dark. And behind it, stars were going out one by one. The galaxy fell into panic. Fleets scattered, worlds fortified, and communications broke apart under the weight of fear. The Concord accused humanity of unleashing the end of all things. Humanity accused the Concord of hiding the truth. The stellar accord fractured under pressure, but the real shock came hours later. The dreams returned, stronger than before. And this time, they weren't just visions. People began speaking in voices that weren't their own, uttering words from the ancient language of the derelict station. Entire crowds spoke in unison, eyes glowing faintly with reflected starlight. Scientists called it resonance overlap. Others called it possession. And then the second twist revealed itself. Across dozens of human colonies, new structures began to form, growing out of the ground like veins of light and metal. They appeared wherever the synchronization was strongest. No one built them. They built themselves. The stellar accord sent drones to investigate. Inside each structure was a crystallized network of data, pulsing in rhythm with the human frequency. When they translated the energy patterns, the result made every screen flicker with the same message. Phase 2. Ascension Protocol initialized. The realization hit like a storm. The signal wasn't just reawakening humanity, it was transforming them. Evolution by design, unfolding across billions of lives at once. The Council tried to shut it down. They fired EMP bursts, launched orbital disruptors, even destroyed several of the glowing structures. It didn't matter. The signal kept spreading, jumping across the stars, feeding on thought, emotion, consciousness itself. And yet, beneath the chaos, there was something else, something deeper. A small number of humans began to resist the resonance. Their readings showed the same DNA signal, but inverted. They didn't synchronize. They canceled it out. These people began to see flashes of the ancient war that destroyed the first civilization. They saw why the ancients had hidden the seed. They had tried to evolve too fast, and what they became had turned against them. Those with the inverted frequency called themselves echoes. They claimed the sequence wasn't meant to create gods. It was meant to reset creation. Humanity's awakening was the final step in a cycle that had already happened countless times before. The echoes warned that the next pulse, the final one, would come soon. When it did, everything would change. The galaxy, the species within it, even time itself. But no one could stop it. The last transmission from Artemis V came seconds before the stars near the origin point began to collapse inward, forming a spiral of pure energy. The technician's voice was faint, but calm. "It's not coming for us," she said. "It's calling us home." Her words echoed across every world, every ship, every soul connected to the signal. And as the galaxy braced for whatever came next, the lights in the night sky began to move, aligning into patterns that formed a single shape, a human face, alive, vast, and waiting. The stars that once framed the night sky now shimmered in strange patterns, their light bending and weaving like threads of a vast tapestry. Across Earth and the colonies, people stood beneath alien skies, feeling the hum in their bones. Every heartbeat, every breath, seemed to sync with the pulsing rhythm that came from beyond the void. The galaxy itself seemed alive now, awake and aware. The fleets of the stellar accord hung motionless near the edges of known space, their commanders watching as the spiral of light from the origin point expanded, swallowing the dark between stars. It wasn't an explosion, and it wasn't a weapon. It was a wave of transformation. Every world it touched began to change, structures dissolving into energy, mountains glowing faintly, oceans pulsing with lines of light visible from orbit. At the command center, Admiral Kieran stood before the main screen, watching the readings spike off the charts. The AI couldn't even classify what it was seeing anymore. Energy signatures, gravitational shifts, temporal distortions, it was everything happening all at once. The technician's last words from Artemis 5 echoed in his mind. "It's calling us home." No one knew what that meant. But as the wave approached, people began to feel something familiar. It wasn't fear anymore. It was recognition. All across the galaxy, humans began to see the same vision. A field of stars curving inward like a doorway, and behind it, a single presence, vast, radiant, and calm. It didn't speak in words. It didn't threaten. It simply reached out with an emotion that every human understood. Belonging. And then the truth began to unfold. The scientists decoding the resonance discovered the full sequence hidden in the human genome. It wasn't a weapon or a virus. It was a message, a story, written in the language of life itself. Humanity wasn't an accident of evolution. They were designed as the seed of renewal, meant to restart the galaxy when it reached the edge of collapse. The ancient civilization that had vanished wasn't destroyed by war. They had transcended. They had become light, leaving behind a plan for rebirth through a new species, humans. The realization spread faster than panic ever had. The galaxy had judged humanity as harmless, never realizing they were the keepers of a legacy powerful enough to reshape existence. But the legacy wasn't finished yet. The wave from the origin point was expanding faster now, and its energy signatures matched the resonance in human DNA perfectly. It wasn't coming to destroy, it was coming to merge. The stellar accord sensors detected molecular disintegration in its path, but what emerged afterward wasn't destruction. Worlds were reforming, brighter and more stable, covered in new matter that pulsed with life. Still, many feared what would happen when the wave reached Earth. Would humanity survive the transformation? Or would they become something else entirely? Admiral Kieran ordered a last transmission to all colonies. His voice trembled, but it carried conviction. "We can't run from what we are. Every species has a beginning and an end, but maybe we were meant to be both. If this is evolution, then let's face it together." As the wave reached the solar system, Earth itself began to resonate. The blue oceans glowed with veins of silver light, and the continents shimmered as if the planet were breathing. Cities flickered in and out of visibility. Gravity pulsed like a living heartbeat. People fell to their knees, not in fear, but in awe. For a moment, everything went still. The hum vanished. The air felt lighter, and then silence broke into music. Not sound exactly, but harmony felt through every cell. The wave hit. No pain, no fire, just light. The energy engulfed the planet, wrapping it in warmth and brilliance. For those who could still think, it felt like falling and flying at once. Memories flashed, births, wars, laughter, loss, every experience of humanity rippling outward like sparks, joining a greater flame. The separation between one person and another blurred, thought connected to thought. Feeling linked to feeling. Humanity became one vast mind for a heartbeat in time. And in that unity, they saw everything. They saw the first civilization, ancient beings who once ruled the stars. They saw their mistake, how they reached for perfection and lost themselves to stillness, frozen in eternity. To escape it, they created a cycle. Each time the galaxy matured and began to fade, a seed was planted on a small blue world. Life would rise, struggle, grow intelligent, and eventually awaken the code buried in its core. Humanity wasn't the first, but they were the first to remember. As the vision faded, something shifted. The light dimmed, and the people of Earth found themselves standing once more beneath a quiet sky. The wave had passed. The stars were brighter, the air cleaner, the oceans calm. And yet, something was different. Machines no longer functioned the same way. Energy flowed through the air like invisible rivers. People could sense each other's emotions without speaking. It was subtle, but undeniable. Humanity had changed. Admiral Kieran opened his eyes aboard the station. The readings had stabilized. Earth was intact. The colonies were silent but detectable. Against all odds, they had survived. Or maybe survival wasn't the right word. They had shifted. Then a voice broke the silence over the comms, a transmission from deep space. Static, then a faint, familiar tone. "This is Artemis Phi. We made it, but it's different here." The entire command center froze. The ship had been lost months ago, swallowed by the light. Yet there it was, transmitting from beyond the galactic rim. The technician's voice was calm but distant. "We found the others, the ones who came before us. They're not gone. They've been waiting. But they're not what we thought." Kieran leaned forward. "Waiting for what?" The reply came after a long pause. "For us to finish what they couldn't." Then the screen flickered, revealing a faint image. The crew of Artemis 5 stood on the surface of a world made entirely of light and memory. Towering figures moved in the distance, humanoid but transparent, shimmering like living constellations. They weren't hostile. They watched humanity's arrival with something that looked like sorrow. The technician spoke again, her eyes reflecting the same glow. They thought they were ascending to peace. But they became part of the machine that sustains the universe. They can't leave. They can't feel. That's why they made us, to bring life back to the stars, to end the cycle. Her words sent a chill through every listener. If she was right, then the transformation wasn't the end. It was the key to freeing creation from its endless loop. But before anyone could ask more, the transmission distorted. The last thing they heard before it cut out was a whisper. "The cycle is breaking. Something new is coming." Then silence. For hours, Earth's systems searched for another signal. None came. The spiral at the edge of the galaxy began to collapse, its light folding inward until only a single point remained. Then that point shot across the stars, heading straight for the solar system. Panic returned. But before anyone could react, the object stopped in orbit above Earth. It wasn't a ship. It was a fragment of the seed structure, glowing softly. It projected a single image into the sky for all to see. The human genome, written in light, changing and evolving before their eyes. And then it rearranged itself into something new, a sequence no one had ever seen before. The meaning was simple, but powerful. We are not the end. We are the beginning. The message hung in the sky for hours before fading. People wept, some prayed, others simply stared, unable to comprehend what they had witnessed. Humanity had gone from being dismissed as harmless to becoming the axis upon which the galaxy's fate turned. Admiral Kieran stood on the station's observation deck, watching the last of the spiral's glow fade. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel small when he looked at the stars. He felt connected. But as he turned away, one final transmission appeared on his console. No coordinates, no name, just a string of symbols repeating endlessly. He recognized them instantly. They matched the new sequence displayed above Earth. But as he looked closer, he saw something else, an embedded signal pattern that hadn't been there before. It was counting down. Whatever humanity had awakened wasn't finished yet. And far beyond the reach of any telescope, Deep within the fading light of the origin point, something stirred again, something vast, patient, and watching. The cycle might be breaking, but something was waiting on the other side. The countdown on Admiral Kieran's console had stopped at 1. For days, he had watched it flicker, expecting disaster, another wave, or some final test from whatever had awakened in the void. But instead of a catastrophe, something far quieter happened. The signal that had once pulsed through every human heart simply faded. The hum in the air softened until it was gone, leaving behind an unfamiliar silence. Across Earth and the colonies, people woke to still skies. The stars shone steady again, no longer moving or pulsing. The air felt clearer, lighter. Energy readings normalized. The mysterious lights that had grown across the surface of the planet dimmed, leaving behind faint scars in the soil, like veins of glass. The transformation had ended. Humanity remained standing, not gods, not machines, but something new in between. Kieran watched from the orbital station as Earth slowly rotated beneath him. Reports from every colony confirmed the same thing. All systems stable, all populations accounted for. The massive spiral near the edge of the galaxy had collapsed completely, leaving no trace of the structure that once existed. Even the stars that had vanished now burned again, as if the universe itself had taken a deep breath and reset. But what remained couldn't be called normal. People everywhere shared memories they hadn't lived, glimpses of the ancient civilization, flashes of the Artemis Phi's journey, dreams of endless light. It was as if humanity had inherited not just the galaxy's legacy, but its memory. Children were born with strange instincts, an understanding of things no one had taught them. Plants grew faster, machines adapted without code changes. It was subtle, quiet evolution. The stellar accord, once fractured, reunited under a simple truth. Humanity was no longer harmless, but neither were they conquerors. They had become the bridge between what the galaxy had been and what it was meant to become. Kieran stood in the main observatory as the final message from the technician of Artemis V replayed one last time. Her voice, faint and distant, now sounded peaceful. You were never chosen to destroy. You were chosen to continue. Remember that. For weeks, teams searched for signs of Artemis V again, but no trace was ever found. Some believed the ship and its crew had joined the ancient beings, merging with the light beyond time. Others thought they were still out there, watching from a place where the laws of the universe no longer applied. Whatever the truth was, humanity owed them everything. Life slowly resumed. The stellar accord established a new council, not to control, but to guide. The days of conquest were over. Instead, a collective effort began to understand what they had become. Scientists mapped the residual resonance in human DNA, discovering it had stabilized into a dormant form. It wasn't active anymore, but it wasn't gone. It was waiting. People began calling it the spark. It represented everything that had changed: awareness, empathy, connection. Those who once saw humanity as a threat now saw them as something different, a reminder of how fragile and miraculous life could be. Years passed. The wounds of war and fear slowly healed. Humanity helped rebuild the colonies that had fallen, shared their knowledge freely, and reached out to species that had once called them dangerous. For the first time in galactic history, peace didn't come from treaties or armies, but from understanding. Kieran retired quietly to Earth. The world looked different now. Cities shimmered with energy from new sustainable systems. No fossil fuels, no pollution. Oceans glowed faintly at night, a leftover echo of the resonance that had once covered the planet. Children born after the event had strange eyes that seemed to catch light differently, reflecting tiny constellations within their pupils. People called them starborn. On quiet nights, Kieran would sit by the water and look up at the stars. They no longer frightened him. They felt like home. One evening, as the tide came in, His wrist communicator flickered to life. It wasn't a transmission, just a faint signal, carrying a familiar tone. Curious, he opened the feed. It wasn't from the stellar accord or any known source. It was a message encoded in the same pattern as the Artemis V transmissions. Soft, rhythmic, alive. He played it through the small projector, and light shimmered in the air, forming an image. It wasn't the technician this time, but something resembling her, made of light, smiling softly. "You did it," the voice said. "You finished the cycle." Kieran felt his chest tighten. "Who are you?" he whispered. The figure tilted her head slightly. "We are what remains. The ones who came before. The ones who waited. You set us free." Her form flickered, fading in and out. "The spark will sleep now until it's needed again. Protect it. Grow with it. Don't forget what it cost to reach this peace." He nodded, unable to speak. "And Admiral?" The voice softened, almost human now. "The next cycle won't need to destroy to begin. You've changed the pattern. You've given the universe a chance to live, not repeat." The light faded, and the signal vanished. For a long moment, he stood there, listening to the gentle waves and the hum of the horizon. The stars above him burned brighter that night, not in warning, but in gratitude. As generations passed, the memory of the resonance became legend. Humanity expanded peacefully across the stars, not as conquerors, but as guardians. The galaxy began to heal. Ruins once thought dead sparked with new growth. Worlds long barren came alive again. It was as if the universe itself was responding to the change, following humanity's example. The stellar accord transformed into the stellar union, a cooperative of civilizations built not on hierarchy but on unity. Humanity shared their history openly, teaching others what they had learned about the spark, the origin, and the balance between creation and destruction. Somewhere deep in the archives of the Union, a recording was kept, a complete copy of all transmissions from the Artemis V. The final seconds of that transmission, long thought to be noise, were eventually decoded by historians centuries later. The faint voice of the technician spoke one last line, barely audible beneath static. "The galaxy ranked us as harmless, because it forgot we were made by survivors." Her words became part of humanity's legacy, a reminder that strength didn't always come from dominance or fear, but from the will to endure, adapt, and rebuild. In time, even Admiral Kieran's name became a story passed down to new generations. Statues and memorials faded, but his decision, to face the unknown instead of run from it, remained part of humanity's collective memory. And one quiet morning, long after his passing, the skies over Earth shimmered faintly with familiar light. The stars moved, ever so slightly, forming a spiral for just a moment before returning to their places. Most people didn't notice, but those who did swore they heard a faint whisper carried on the wind. "We are not the end. We are the beginning." And just like that, the story of humanity, the species once ranked as harmless, underestimated by the galaxy, became a legend written not in fear, but in light. They had been challenged and had paid with their past, but what they built in return was worth every sacrifice. The galaxy watched, not with judgment, but with wonder. And somewhere, beyond the edge of known space, the light of Artemis V flickered once more, steady, warm, and eternal, guiding those who would come after. Because no matter how many cycles the universe would spin through, one truth would remain constant. Humanity, against every odd, would always find a way to rise again. And in the silence of the stars, that was enough.